how can we be less defensive and less reactive to life, to what people say?
Yeah, I think it's kind of cluing into what our negative core beliefs about ourselves are. So people get defensive for different reasons. So if I say something to someone and they get upset, I could feel like, are you saying that I'm a mean person? Which triggers my negative core belief that I'm bad. So I'm defensive because I feel like you're saying I'm a bad person. Or I can get defensive because I asked for time off from my boss and he said no. And then I feel put upon, I feel unvalued because my whole life I feel like I'm undervalued. I'm always giving and no one appreciates me. And so I get defensive about that. And so again, I think it's connected to figuring out who we are and what we want and also what we actually believe about ourselves. And once I get to that negative core belief, I'm able to start to work on that and reprogram that and give myself new messages about that. And then once I do that, it no longer matters what my boss says to me. If my boss is in a mood or if he does say no to me, then I'm not so triggered and activated and elevated because I feel like he's telling me that I don't matter and the organization can go on without me or whatever the message might be. Or my husband, what was the example I gave? Says I'm a bad person, like, no, I know I'm a good person. I know I'm a good wife. And, maybe this meant something else. Maybe they weren't actually trying to hurt me, but I internalized that because of the lens I'm with. But once I lose that activation, then those things no longer hurt me as much, right? Because I don't need them to tell me I'm good enough. So it's going back to the self-love and getting to know ourselves and loving ourselves. It's so, so hard to love ourselves. We're able to give it to everybody else's codependence, but we just feel like we're not worthy. And it's a lie that we really, really have to unplug from and stop feeding.
Right. Yeah, I like that you say stop feeding because that's really right. It's therein lies the addiction of the lies, of telling ourselves we're unlovable or unworthy or whatever, or bad, So, I think that's addictive too. So I love all of that. Thank you for diving into that. I'd love to chat with you a little bit about adolescence because I know that you do a lot of work with teens. I think the first time I listened to you and your work was on Brian Pizer's podcast, Codependency No More, and he's actually on this event as well. And I really loved your message, and you were talking a lot about these adolescents. So let's talk about adolescence and codependency and how do you help them either stop a pattern from starting, in their relationships, like codependent relationships, or, just help them develop healthily so that they don't become codependent as adults.
Yeah. Adolescents, I feel like are so hard to work with, not because they're teenagers, but because they're still in the household that's triggering the codependency. Right. And so if codependency comes from how we grow up and how we learn whether or not we're valued or not, or if we have parents who are addicts or mentally unstable or workaholics or whatever, and we have to compensate, I could tell a teen all day long, you're worthy and valuable, and they go back home to a household where that's not the truth. So I've found that for it to truly be successful, parents have to be involved. It has to be a family therapy thing. It has to be where mom and dad are open to either enacting changes or validating the experience of the adolescent. In the meantime, if that's not the case, if that's not what I'm working with, especially because a lot of times I worked in the school systems when I was working with teenagers, and parents either weren't available or not interested. It would be planting seeds with them in the same way that I kind of described with women and love addiction and everything, and kind of talking about what's happening in the family, verbalizing that they have permission to not be the parent, to not be the caregiver of everybody there, because a lot of times that's a novel idea. They've never heard that before. They don't even know that's a possibility, and it's mind-blowing to them. And even if the reality is such that with this new revelation, they still have to do these things, otherwise the family doesn't function, now they know there's an alternative. And so I talk with them about that. I talk with them about how it feels, the pressure of being everybody's everything, and how it's not fair. I'm sure that you and your listeners can probably relate with sometimes just there's healing and be able to talk about it and not being shamed by feeling this way, by not feeling like you're selfish. And that's really helped the teenagers that I've worked with a lot as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes. Just being able to talk with somebody. And a lot of times, right, talking with somebody outside of the family who's this safe, mediator kind of person. I remember going to counseling as a kid when my parents split up, and, I had a lot of anger towards my dad and his drinking and all of that. And I remember it felt so good to be able to be in a room with him and this guy, Jim, who I'll always remember, right? He was just such this amazing, I'll always remember this man, and how he helped me, being able to be there and be able to say how I felt,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that was really, a key piece in my development as a 9-year-old, so.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank God for Jim.
I know. Jim Petrie was his name. And I grew up in Boulder, Colorado. And I haven't thought of him in a while, but it just brought that up for me, and what a great, stand he took for me and my brother during that challenge. And I'm so glad that we were, able to do it. And I'm so glad that my mom wanted us to do it, because she really got us in the door. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, I love that. I mean, that's so important. Think about, obviously, the adolescents, having you and other people to support them in their journey. I can only imagine how supportive that is, for their futures. So yeah. And again, what you said too about not necessarily, if the parents aren't necessarily supporting that process, at least the kid is going to know that there's some other choice, right? That, they have support and there's a different choice. So thank you
for sure
for that. So let's dive, we talked a little bit about self-love as being, right, this crucial thing in the world of overcoming codependency. So, one of the things I've found doing these interviews is that, codependency isn't just this issue that we have with other partners, let's say. It's an issue we have with ourselves, right? It's an unhealthy relationship with ourselves. So if you had, advice to suggest for people on how to improve their relationship with themselves, what might that be?
Good question. How to improve your relationships with yourself. I tend to be a give me the steps kind of person. I don't really like talking in generality. So I'm going to give you steps that may not be foolproof, but it's what I'm going to give you. So I really like journaling. And I like journaling because there's something about putting things on paper that gets it out of your mind, and it's all running around to where you can see what you actually think and what you actually feel, which builds some awareness about it. I can't tell you how many times I thought that I had clarity about a situation. I know exactly why I'm mad. And then when I wrote it out, I was like, oh, this is actually how I feel. Okay. And then once I'm able to do that, then I'm able to realize, okay, what are these negative core beliefs I actually think about myself, right? And then once I do that, then I'm able to figure out, okay, when did this start? Where did this come from? When was the first time that I remember feeling this way? And then once I'm able to pinpoint who that person is and I build some awareness, then I can say, wait, that's not my voice. That's the voice of my mother, the voice of my father. What is it that I actually think about myself, or what is it that I actually want to feel about myself? What's the type of lifestyle that I want to have, and what can I manifest? And then I start to write those things down too. And again, it really is about reprogramming ourselves. There's no amount of self-help books and techniques and therapy sessions you go to unless you actually actively outside of it talk to yourself and you learn to take care of you and you learn how to self-soothe and give yourself compassion. I think one way to get self-love as well is when bad things happen to us or when we make mistakes, for us to come back and give us the same love and affirmation that we would give our best friend. The whole take yourself out of situations. If my friend Sally were to do this really crappy thing, what would I tell her? Okay, now let me tell that to myself, right? And sometimes you need that in between because we don't really connect. It's so hard to connect to ourselves, right? So I think a lot of self-exploration, talking to ourselves like we're crazy, and it's okay because we're actually talking to us, so we're not crazy. And all love to people who have auditory hallucinations and stuff. That's not supposed to be shaming, but know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I think that that's key, right? And that is, right, building this healthy relationship with ourselves, right? This is the most important in my mind, right? Like relationship, we're going to be with us until the end. So it seems like an important one to, really work through and work on.